Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to kick it off. So for those of you on the line, welcome. I'm Brittany from the Fashion for Good team. I'm coming to you from Amsterdam. I hope everyone is doing healthy and well in these kind of crazy times. So you can see me at the top, and then I have my co-panelists on here as well, and we'll go around and do some introductions in about 2 minutes or so. Thanks for tuning in for this edition of Meet the Innovators. It's certainly not our first one. We've done about 25 of these over the past 3 years, but this is our first virtual one. So bear with us here. We usually host these in our headquarters in Amsterdam. And what we typically do at the beginning of the session is poll the audience to see who's in the room, you know, kind of what part or segment of the industry do you come from? So if you don't mind, and also as a way to kind of get engaged right off the bat, we have a quick poll for you to complete. So Nicola, thank you, popping up. So please complete this quick little poll. It's telling me I'm a host or a panelist and I can't vote, but hopefully all of you can. Cool. So before we get started, I wanted to give a little quick background on Fashion for Good. Some of you certainly know this, and for some of you it may be new. So we're a global initiative. We were set up to connect innovators and industry to drive commercial adoption of sustainable solutions at each stage of the supply chain. So over the past 3 years, we scouted over 2,000 startups from around the world. We've supported over 90 of them in our programs, our Accelerator and our scaling programs. And we recently launched our 7th batch, which is what brings us here today. And we're really focused on supporting our innovators and enabling strategic opportunities with our 18 corporate partners from across the industry. So with that said, let's get to it. You'll hear from 3 of our innovators today. Specifically, I have Ben from the Oritain team. He's based in the UK. He's going to talk to you about their traceability solution. And then I have Ross from Full Cycle Bioplastics coming to us from the Bay Area, where he'll explain their technology that converts waste streams into biodegradable bioplastics. And Cam from Dry Fibers, also coming from the West Coast, who creates water and oil repellent finishes without the use of PFCs. So the way in which we'll work this session is we'll do a short pitch followed by a Q&A session. There were a lot of questions collected prior, so I have quite a few to get started. But if there are any others that come up during, please use the Q&A, yep, someone's already done it, the Q&A feature in the Zoom down below on your screen. So, all right, I'll hand it over to Ben. The screen is yours.
Perfect. Hi there, everyone. Thanks so much for the introduction. Brittany, just let me know if you guys can see that. All good? Perfect. So yeah, thanks so much for the kind introduction. And yeah, today just going to give a bit of background to who Oritain is and what it is that we do, and why we believe it's of such importance to the fashion industry, especially in this current climate of today as well. So a bit about the issue, I guess. What is the real importance of having traceability and transparency across global supply chains within the fashion industry? So at Oritain, we believe that if you can't prove the origin of a product, it's very difficult to substantiate any particular claims that are made with that garment, and whether that is ensuring high levels of sustainability or ethical impact that cotton has had in that particular t-shirt, or whether it is understanding the animal welfare practices of the wool that's used in a particular jumper. And unfortunately, and as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, that fashion in most parts has a very complex and global supply chain that is in most instances pretty fragmented. And this makes it really difficult for brands and retailers and consumers to have certainty in the origin of raw materials that they're sourcing. And I guess, unfortunately, one of the core reasons that we exist is because paper documentation and labels and barcodes and other forms of traceability methods can be misused, they can be mislabeled, they can even be misrepresented. And it's really important, therefore, to have that level of traceability and be able to have a third-party verification to ensure the fiber's origin. And we believe that traceability is a prerequisite for understanding the impacts, whether it be environmental or social, of that particular fiber. And just to put this into a bit of perspective, Kering, for example, who've been ranked one of the highest in terms of the Fashion Revolution's Transparency Index, were actually found that around 75 to 80% of their impact that they measured through their environmental profit and loss had actually come from the raw materials. So it's really critical to understand the origin of that raw material to get a true understanding of the environmental and social impact. So a little bit about Oritain. We have 5 offices across the world. We have a gender split within our workforce of about 50-50. And around 13 different nationalities who are all helping us to deliver capabilities in over 20 different products to clients and entities in around 20 different countries worldwide. We were founded initially out of the University of Otago, which is in New Zealand, and we were founded by a gentleman called Professor Russell Frew. From working within the food industry pretty heavily, we then took a step into fibre. So our first partnership was with a company called Walls of New Zealand. And over the past sort of 4 to 5 years, we've had considerable milestone achievements with some partnerships, including the likes of Kering and Wellspun, and a number of others. And our real goal is to be the world's most trusted company at scientifically verifying origin. And we really want our impact to help support companies and brands and retailers to underpin their environmental, social and governance goals, as well as underpin the SDG goals that are currently in place, so the Sustainable Development Goals, and also help alleviate modern slavery from global supply chains. So trust but verify. So we use forensic science to prove the origin of products. And this science actually originated from the criminal forensic field. So it was initially used in homicides and ballistics and glass fragment identification. And it was Professor Russell Frew and his team back in 2008 that realized that there was a commercial application for this particular science. So just to give it a bit of an example, everything that is grown or reared or made is actually a product of its environment. And albeit this is a tree, if we take the example of cotton. So cotton absorbs nutrients from the soil. It's impacted by climatic conditions, atmospheric conditions, rain and waterfall. And this cotton plant is absorbing all of those nutrients. And what we're testing for is trace elements and isotopes. And these are elements which are unique to the production location in which that fiber is grown. So cotton from the US looks very different from that of cotton in India and Brazil and Pakistan, and so on. And because we're measuring for these elements in parts per million and parts per billion, we're even able to identify differences down to not only country, but region and also farm of origin. So once we've created the database of that genuine fiber, because we're not having to add anything to the fiber or spray it with anything, we're not having to integrate any particular machinery or integrate our solution as part of complex fashion supply chains. And that enables us to get great scalability and flexibility for implementing traceability programs. And we're able to test at any point across the supply chain as well. And so I won't leave this on for too long in case it mesmerizes any of the audience, but the real beauty we found in creating these initial databases is that once they've been implemented and created, they can't be tampered with, they can't be replicated, and they can't be destroyed. And at any stage in the supply chain, we're able to test against that. So just by purely being a product test, and by that we mean taking a sample of yarn or raw cotton lint or fabric to ensure its correct origin. And so lastly, just to put this into a bit of perspective, focusing on a couple of key milestone partnerships that we have in place. We work, for example, with Kering and have recently been included in their sustainability progress report for the work we've conducted in both cotton and leather. recently really excitingly announced our partnership with Theory for their Good Cotton program, and that's ensuring cotton used in their core women's and men's shirting line has come from farms in California specifically that are growing one of the extra long staple fibers. And lastly, we've also become the official traceability partner for all of Cotton USA, which has been an incredible milestone for us to achieve. So that's a very brief sort of synopsis of Oritain. So I hope that has been helpful for everyone.
Great, thanks, Ben. So for those of you that may have joined later on in the session, the way in which we're going about it is we're doing 3 different pitches, and at the end of each of the pitch, we'll do a short Q&A, and then at the end, we'll have a little bit of extra time left for additional questions. We've been gathering Q&A over the sign-up process, so we have quite a few to get started with, and if there's any that come to mind while you're in the session, please put them in the Q&A feature in Zoom. All right, so Ben, a couple of questions for you. The first one, let me see, it says, what types of material or fibers is Oritain capable of tracing?
Sure, so it's pretty versatile. So the technology that we use has come from the criminal forensic field. So it's been used in homicides and ballistics. And so we have then implemented that technology into food and other materials and work very closely within the fashion industry. So it's applicable across cotton. We work in wool, mohair, so a number of different plant-based fibers and animal-based fibers that the technology is transferable.
Okay, thank you for that. Are you able to identify whether something is organic using your technology?
So that's a really interesting question. There's currently no method in place or substantiated method in place to be able to identify if something is organic or not. The way in which we support a number of entities to substantiate organic claims is through proxy of origin. So through our technology, we can verify that cotton has in fact come from a single farm of origin. And if that farm is organic got certified, then not only the brand and retailer has comfort that it's organic cotton as such, but so too does the consumer as well. So that's how we implement and help support claims around organic.
Great, okay. Let's see. Does your solution act as an alternative to blockchain traceability solutions? Or does it complement them?
So we definitely get asked this question a lot, and our sort of approach to traceability is we're no silver bullet. There should be a multitude of different approaches that companies and entities should instill within their company. We definitely see ourselves as as something complementary to blockchain. So one of the real benefits of blockchain is that it's immutable, but it's also one of its pitfalls, so that once someone enters information into a blockchain, the information becomes valid, it becomes genuine. So what we're looking to provide is that physical product test to then connect it to the digital blockchain. So we definitely run in conjunction with blockchain solutions and other traceability methods.
Cool. All right. And then this one, perhaps a little bit of a baited question, but are you able to identify a location specific enough to verify all sustainability claims? So for example, 2 sheep farms producing wool could be right next to each other or very close, but one is certified and one is not.
Sure. So the level of specificity that we can get down to is actually pretty incredible because it is a forensic level science. And so there's been a number of instances in the food industry where the science has been able to prove the origin between tomatoes, between 2 different greenhouses at either side of a dirt road. So the level of specificity that we can get down to is pretty incredible. And yes, there has been instances, especially within cotton and wool, where we're able to identify differences between individual farms of origin. It's really driven by what the brand and retailer wants to be able to substantiate. So for example, one of our initial programs with Kering was proving organic cotton to a single farm of origin in New Mexico. So it's definitely doable, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, what makes isotopes better than using other naturally occurring identifiers, so DNA samples or microbiome information?
Sure, so to answer the DNA, there's two sort of streams of forensic science and chemistry, one being DNA and one being isotopes and trace element analysis. And to give it a bit of context, DNA will tell you what something is, but it won't necessarily tell you where something is actually from. So take Pima cotton. If you were to run a DNA test, it would tell you that it's a Pima variety, but that particular variety can be grown in a multitude of different countries. So what we're being able to provide is the traceability of that fiber, which then helps to substantiate claims around sustainability, water usage, ethical, social impacts. Microbiomes is a really interesting development. From our understanding, it's still in the very early stages of its concept, and there's still a lack of understanding for what it can really help provide. And it's very similar to the technology that we're utilizing currently in the fact that it requires a mass database. So that takes time to build. We've been working for over 10 years now in building out those databases, which do take some time, but it's definitely a technology that we're always looking to, whether it provides real benefit to the solution that we're also providing, as opposed to being a competitor to what we're offering.
Very helpful, thank you. So let me see if we can cover some of these in the chat. I'm not sure we'll be able to get to all of them, but let's see what ground we can cover. Are blends possible to detect using the technology? Blends are different proportions, also different materials.
Sure. So simple answer, yes. So we work with blended products where there could be a composition of cotton plus a recycled polyester component. And we've built up significant IP in the fact that we can identify and take away the synthetic components, that we're just analyzing the cotton component of that particular garment. So that's one way in which we deal with blends. The other way in which we deal with blends, and probably one of the real benefits I guess our solution provides to the market, is that we're able to identify blending. So blending between a compliant origin, so US cotton being blended with Indian for an economic driver, but that also becomes really relevant when you're discussing social compliance. So understanding if there's cotton in your supply chain that could potentially have been cultivated from high-risk origins that may be endorsing slave labor. So there's some of the real insights that we can also provide a number of our clients.
And then what about, kind of piggybacking off of another question, what about recycled raw materials?
So recycled is a really interesting space. And one we're definitely looking at how we can develop into. And we're working with a couple of partners on some initial pilot projects for more man-made fibers. Recycled is an interesting one, and we're looking at potential solutions for how we can transfer our technology into that space. So, for example, within the food industry, we work with multi-ingredient products, which is a very similar format to that of recycled polyester. So we definitely believe it's transferable.
Okay. All right. So then over to kind of the product side of things. So can brands buy this traceability tool easily, and what is the product form?
Sure. So it's almost a software as a solution, what we're providing. So we look to provide commercial programs to brands and retailers to be able to utilize the databases that we have built to provide verification programs. So whether it's annual or monthly or based on seasonal, so spring, summer, fall, winter collections, to be able to test at varying levels in the supply chain. So not necessarily an off-the-shelf product as such. We create bespoke programs to provide the most amount of value to our clients and customers, and also reduce risk from their supply chains.
And then building on that a bit, so does Oritain have experience integrating traceability verification or information with consumer-facing applications?
So we're predominantly a B2B entity, because a lot of brands and retailers want to ensure they have traceability and sustainability within their supply chain. We're definitely seeing and the environment and the trends around sustainability and the customer sentiment, that this is something that brands want to be able to communicate. So we're seeing a lot of our programs now becoming more consumer facing. So we had a great campaign with Country Road for their traceable merino program, where they had some amazing video footage. Our logo was actually on label to really communicate to the consumer that Country Road have done this level of due diligence and testing. So I definitely see the trend is going that way. For hopefully a couple of years time, or 3 or 4 years time, that a consumer can pick up our product or a brand's product and see the Oritain logo there and have certainty around its origin.
Wonderful. And then one last question for you, which I think is probably applicable to all three of you guys today. We'll circle back on it at the end as well. But Allison asked, to what extent has IP been a consideration in the protection and exploitation of your innovations?
So yeah, I'm sure the other guys definitely have a lot to add on this, but for us, IP is significant. It's difficult because in a lot of instances it's hard to measure, but the way in which we've built up a lot of our value is in understanding of processing, being able to test finished product, understanding blending scenarios, and also building out that database, which we had considerable development in a lot of the fibers and textiles that we work in. So that's a considerable, I would say, competitive advantage of ours, and definitely IP that we look to protect, but also be able to get value from our customer base as well.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. Much appreciated.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. So next we're going to go over to Ross from Full Cycle Bioplastics. Ross, let me know. You should be able to share your screen. Yeah.
Great.
Perfect.
Thanks, Ben. That was fantastic and a tough act to follow, so I appreciate it. Yeah, my name's Ross Polk from Full Cycle. Very excited to be here today, and I want to quickly thank the Fashion for Good team for putting this event together amidst the recent challenges, let's put it. So today I'll be telling you a bit about how our company is building a circular solution for fashion using a material made from something new. And I'm going to try to move quickly so that we can get to the Q&A, which is where all the fun is anyway. So really quickly, what you see in the background here is our the world's first food waste to bioplastic production facility, but I'll get to that in a minute. First, a bit about the problem. So I'm sure you've all heard a lot about the social challenges surrounding plastic pollution and waste management, so I won't belabor that point, but really Full Cycle's technology is unique because we sit at the intersection of these two massive challenges. On the one hand is organic waste pollution, a key contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, of course. And then the other is plastic and fiber pollution, a problem that is disrupting ecosystems and food chains across the planet. We tackle both of these problems by converting the mixed organic waste streams like inedible food waste, agricultural byproducts, and dirty paper and paper streams like cardboard into a compostable resin called polyhydroxyalkanoate. That's a mouthful, so it's colloquially known as PHA. Many of you may have heard of PLA or other bioplastics like starches. This is a different molecule altogether. So PHA is what I'll be referring to it from here on. As such, the PHA that we make, because it's made from waste, because it has this really low processing footprint, has one of the lowest carbon footprints for materials on the planet. And then you can see our technology in action here. So we're a bit earlier stage than perhaps Ben and the team. We were started back in 2013 and have been working really hard on scaling our technology up. And we're really excited about where we're at today, which is, you can see me walking through our commercial facility located in California, where I'm calling you from. And this is really situated on the back of a commercial food production facility. So we're working with a large organization to upcycle the inedible food waste, the banana peels, the fats, oils, and greases that they generate throughout their food production into our PHA resin. We then take that resin and convert it into compostable products that our partner, can use throughout their kitchen operations. So forks, knives, compostable bag liners, you name it. And once those items have been used, they can actually re-enter our PHA production facility to be converted back into virgin resin. And this is the dream, right? So we're trying to close as many carbon loops as possible, and really create circular solutions for both waste and plastics. So moving on a bit about this fantastic material, PHA. In general, PHAs are highly degradable materials that can be used to create a wide range of products, from flexible films to food packaging and coatings, additives, blends. And as I mentioned, it has really unique end-of-life characteristics. So, it can be composted in home and industrial environments, and it's been known to be marine degradable, which I'll likely get to in the Q&A section, although we could probably have a webinar just on biodegradation characteristics and what that means. But our patented technology allows us to create a really wide array of PHAs, so we don't have to just create one type of resin and therefore just singularly one type of product. And so we're really excited about the partnership with Fashion for Good to accelerate the commercialization of these non-toxic circular materials for the fashion industry. In particular, we're targeting a resin that could be well suited for compostable bags. You can see kind of a clear film there, for poly bags or hangers or other supply chain assets, as well as, of course, compostable fibers for use to replace, the micro shedding materials that you all use in your jackets or other wares. So I know I moved quickly. This is the team here. I wanted to get quickly to the Q&A, so with that, I'll give it a pause. But thanks again to Fashion for Good for organizing.
Thanks, Ross. All right, so let's get started with some of the questions we had from beforehand. And again, if you have any, please put them in the Q&A feature on the Zoom tool. So Ross, how long does it take for your products to biodegrade, and in what conditions? So temperature, pressure, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And as someone who's been enmeshed in the world of waste management and now material science, I even still get confused about kind of end-of-life characteristics. So it is quite dizzying. And like I said, I could probably spend an hour talking about this, but I'll try to answer quite quickly. So PHAs, as I mentioned, are one of the most degradable types of materials known. Pure PHA has been used in aquatic applications such as denitrification pellets and even fish food. But PHAs, really, it's a family of polymers, and there are actually 150 different monomer types, and therefore a dizzying amount of comonomers you can create, and therefore recipes. So it gets complicated very quickly. With that, and being said, not all PHAs are compostable. Not all PHAs are even marine degradable. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about kind of the specificity with which we need to. But the PHA material that we're commercializing and that many others are commercializing has been certified as home compostable, marine degradable, and industrial compostable. And the conditions really are around having the right environmental conditions so that bacteria or other microorganisms can actually eat away at that polymer or that natural material. So it's essentially a mix of heat, pressure, and moisture. So at Full Cycle, we're trying to test in all of those conditions: home soil, industrial compostable, and then in different marine ecosystems. So we're doing that at our lab in California. We're working with a number of different commercialization partners around that. But the point that I want to make here too is that we don't strive to throw things, or we don't recommend throwing PHA-based materials into the ocean or marine ecosystem. That's really a last resort. We want these materials and products to be a part of a functional organics recycling loop.
Great, thanks for that. So
yeah,
how's degradability been tested?
Yeah, so various labs. So for us, we've been testing in our lab, as I mentioned, at the USDA, U.S. Department of Agricultural facility in California. We essentially mimic, or do our best to mimic, you know, the environments in which those materials might degrade. As I mentioned, backyard soil, industrial composters. So we're essentially playing with different levers around the temperature, the moisture. When it comes to marine ecosystems, there's a lot of testing that still needs to be done because marine ecosystems are so diverse. There's a lot of different criteria and variability there. So turbidity, temperature, you know, depth, there's just a lot of different variables. So there's a lot of testing that needs to be done, and we want to be a part of that. So Full Cycle is investing in some of the science around that in order to not only improve the certification standards, but also to work with those end-of-life partners, compost facilities, anaerobic digestion facilities, landfills, to ensure that our material degrades appropriately.
And then do you end up producing waste in the process itself, or is it completely waste-free?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it basically works. We take inedible food waste, your banana peel, agricultural byproducts, a solid material, and we'll liquefy it. So we'll ground it up into a carbon-rich soup that we then feed bacteria. I often refer to us as carbon or bacteria farmers. So we want to make them fat and happy. But in that process of hydrolysis or breaking that material down, there is some residual solids. What's so cool at our commercial facility that I showed you is that we actually have a process on site to treat those materials and convert it into high quality compost. And then that compost is actually going out to the farms that the partner actually sources from. So again, we're trying to close as many carbon loops as possible. So that's the long answer. Short answer is yes, there are residuals, but we want to treat them in a sustainable way and continue to build soil health and close carbon loops.
Thank you. And then this one is, I think, a bit, touching on what you talked about in your deck, but how do you manage to create a consistent result with your feedstock or different types of waste streams that's involved?
Yeah, that's part of the magic. A really great question. So that's our intellectual property, right? So that's been the trick, is to take a varied, mixed, heterogeneous material stream and convert it into a really consistent output. Especially when you're trying to sell into the commoditized market that is plastics, you need a very, very consistent output. And that's our intellectual property. And we can do that because we control the breakdown of the waste stream. And then we also control the buildup of the PHA inside bacteria cells. And so we have a proprietary control system that monitors all the environmental conditions, everything that's happening in our reactors, so that we can dial up or dial down the thresholds or those environmental conditions in order to produce this really consistent material. I probably can't say more than that because it's, as I mentioned, proprietary.
Got it. All right. So getting to the textile or fashion space. So could this replace polyester in garments in terms of how it feels and the drape of the fabric? How it feels is a question, but that's one of the key kind of areas of research and commercialization that we're going to be working with Fashion for Good and their partners, really trying to mimic the oil-based materials that are currently used to create something that's non-toxic, compostable, but really high performance. So we're going to be essentially developing a custom resin for that sort of product. But it's going to take some time. So that's really some R&D that we're taking on right now as part of this program. Cool. Happy to share those results when we have them. Great. And then touching on, we have about 3 minutes left and a lot of questions. So apologies to all the attendees. I'm happy to connect afterward too. I'll link my email address in the chat. Great. And we can follow up. So getting towards the commercial aspect of things. So what's the scale for an on-site processing facility, such as the one you described? And then what do the financials look like? How do you make the business case? Yeah. What's that? How do you make the business case for it, I suppose? Yeah. How do you make the business case? So I think perhaps to reframe how you might look at us, full cycle, how the audience might look at us. So it's probably helpful to look at us as a waste technology rather than a material technology, although we are both, because
we're circular, so we're disrupting different sectors. But when you look at us as a waste technology, we're taking something that's really low value, waste streams, organic waste streams that can only be either composted or anaerobically digested. And in the US and Europe, those are really low margin businesses. What we're doing is essentially taking those same feedstocks and creating a much higher margin or higher value material that global CPGs, fashion brands are really seeking. So we're able to create 5 to 10x the value from those same feedstocks, and that creates a really compelling business case. When we talk about minimum viable size, it really depends on the material in question, whether it's bread waste or whether it's acid whey or curbside organics recycling. That really impacts the yields that we have. But we're talking about dozens to hundreds of tons per day. And so we're looking at systems level, kind of change here. We're talking to large food brands, we're talking to municipalities and local regions to really revamp their waste infrastructure so that, we're treating that material correctly and creating really high value circular materials on the output. Hopefully that illuminates it a little bit.
Yep, I think that's good. All right, I'm just trying to think if we could squeeze one more question in. Maybe building off of that, so how do you incentivize kind of the closed loop approach? So, what's the hook?
Yeah, I think it depends on the stakeholder in question, but it typically comes down to economics, right? Does this pencil out? Does this make more money than the traditional approach? And so although we're a mission forward business, we tend to lead with the economic case in order to make, in order to get that interest relatively quickly. And then you pair that with all of the environmental metrics and social metrics that we're after, which is around closing carbon loop. So it really depends on the region. It depends on the partner type. It depends on their own internal, incentives. A food brand is very different than a municipality, which is very different than a fashion brand. But again, happy to connect offline and talk more about how we incentivize it.
Good. And then the last one I think is just more of a comment building on a question, I think 2 questions ago is it possible to use your fibers in knit or blends, cotton lycra for elastic bands, et cetera. So I think we already know the answer to that, but just kind of sharing.
Working on it.
Yeah.
Working on it.
The demand from the audience. So.
Working on it. Yeah. I think because PHAs are so varied and there's so many different co-monomers that you can create or copolymers that you can create rather, there isn't a lot of opportunity to replace all of those materials, but it's going to take some R&D.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you. Ross, yeah, appreciate it.
Cycle. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. On to our third innovator of the evening, day, morning, depending on where you are. We're fortunate enough to have Cam from Dry Fiber here. So Cam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cam from Dry Fiber. We are a Los Angeles-based technology company. We spun out of Dry Wired, which is a ultra-thin conformal coatings company. And to give you a little background on our innovation, a few years ago at Cornell University, the lead scientists in the fiber department of the textile science group teamed up with the materials science department, and using their combined resources, they decided to tackle a major issue in fashion. And that is fluorine, fluorinated chemicals, PFAS, and other toxic chemicals that have been used for decades to create water and oil repellency. We partnered with Cornell, and we're the company commercializing their technology and their research. A little bit about the technology. Our durable water and oil repellent is water-based. It's super hydrophobic, so it's excellent for water repellency. It is oleophobic, and it varies in performance depending on the fiber. We use a food polymer that's currently FDA approved. It exists in several foods, so it's completely biodegradable. The technology is also biocompatible, and the custom monomer that we use creates a covalent bond with the fiber, so we have excellent durability. To give you guys a little background on why this innovation is important, I think it's crucial to understand the history of perfluorinated compounds and chemicals. So PFCs and PFAS are a group of chemicals that are well known historically for the creation of heat resistant, oil resistant, grease resistant, water repellent coatings. The research started in the late 30s, early 40s by the US military, and a group of scientists at DuPont figured out that when you combine fluorine and carbon together, the bond is so strong that it creates new possibilities for stain repellency. At the time, they did not know that they created a very toxic substance. But as the years progressed, that was made clear. So products today that use PFCs or PFAS include outdoor apparel. Some non-stick cookware are still using short chain PFCs, which I can talk about later. And what was surprising to me, because I come from a different industry, was how prevalent PFAS is in food packaging. So if you've ever had microwave popcorn, if you've ever ordered a pizza or had a burger at a fast food place, it is with high certainty that you have consumed this non-degradable toxic substance that's PFAS. So again, historically, it's been used as a stain repellent for carpets. Teflon is the most famous nonstick cookware. And then what's very troubling is that it's still used in firefighting foams. So as a result, these firefighting foams leach into groundwater and have now been directly linked to a bunch of cancers, which I'll also talk about. And then ski waxes, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you take all the skis in the world and you think about snow melting in the spring, those fluorinated chemicals are then leaching into the mountains, into the rivers, into the streams. So a little more information about the problem. A major issue is that it bioaccumulates in our bodies and in the bodies of animals. Again, these chemicals never break down. So they accumulate in nature as well. There have been many studies now linking PFAS and their family of thousands of toxic chemicals to different diseases, different cancers, from prostate to breast to liver. And if you look at the trajectory of increase in cancer over the last 50 years, you can match that line with the distribution of fluorinated chemicals around the world in different industries. So it's very, very troubling. A few more stats. A major issue in the United States is that military bases, which have been using firefighting foams for decades, the families that live on military bases and the people that live around the military bases have very high levels of disease and cancer. And for years, they couldn't figure out why. And only recently did they make that connection that the cancers were directly linked to the fluorinated chemicals from their firefighting foams that they were using in training exercises. And those foams were then seeping into the ground and into the groundwater. So I'm not all bad news, some good news. I think the European Union has really taken the lead in banning some of the PFCs that were historically more toxic. So C8 chemistries, long chain chemistries were banned in the EU in 2008. And then I mentioned here in 2015, 200 scientists got together and made the Madrid Statement, basically asking the international community and saying, listen, enough is enough. PFAS should be limited across the board. Very recently, there was unfortunately a partial global ban that was from the Stockholm Convention. I say partial because PFCs are still allowed in industrial applications, which again is very troubling. So if you're an oil worker with workwear, you're going to have PFCs in your clothing, and there is potential that those toxic substances will still leach into your body. Another positive thing is we've seen a lot of change in apparel companies really pushing for PFC-free finishing, and basically them saying, listen, we've had enough. We don't believe that short chain PFAS is safe, even though many chemical companies are claiming that it is safe. And so we've had enough and we're banning all PFCs. So that's a positive thing. I think the apparel industry, groups like Greenpeace have really brought these issues to light. And then, sorry, more bad news. A lot of these large chemical companies are still profiting, are still selling PFCs. Now they may be selling shorter chain PFCs, and they will debate and say that those short chain PFCs are completely safe, that they don't bioaccumulate. There's another group of scientists and recent research by the US National Toxicology Program that discusses the opposite, that short chain PFCs are not safer, that they do bioaccumulate, and some scientists believe that they're actually more harmful. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to talk about our technology and answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Cam. So as I say at this juncture with all of the past two panelists, if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A feature on Zoom. I have some to get us started. So Cam, can you tell us a bit more about the performance of your new finishing technology? Is it an alternative to durable water repellent finishes, for example?
Yes, so we have, again, excellent water repellency. So we are better than conventional DWRs currently on the market because we are super hydrophobic, extremely durable. For DWORs or oil repellency, we are not as good as industrial PFC toxic oil repellents, but we're progressing and becoming better and better. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to match that performance one day.
And then do you think that PFCs will ever be completely restricted?
So because I work in nanomaterials, and I've seen a lot of research in structural patterning and structural coloring, I believe that a lot of the chemicals that are being used in the fashion industry will be replaced with non-wet solutions like structural patterning, nano imprint lithography, where you can imprint the topography on an individual fiber, and that topography will give you the functionality that you're looking for. So I believe, and it's going to push me out of business eventually, but I believe that it is possible, and that kind of research is very exciting.
And then getting at that question, I think from a bit of a different angle. So if the fashion industry is already not using FPAs, what's the dry fiber use case in fashion? What are you replacing?
So we're giving the companies that have that stopped using PFCs, we're giving them a choice to add oil repellency again without PFAS. So a lot of the apparel brands have said, listen, we just don't want oil repellency anymore because we know that with oil repellency comes dangerous fluorinated chemistries. What we're able to do is say, that's not necessarily true. We have a solution. We have an alternative solution. You can add oil repellency, additional functionality to your apparel without having to sacrifice that.
Great. Okay. All right. So let me see. I think that is it for now. If I can get all of the panelists back on video before we close out, cognizant of everyone's time. I know we have just a few minutes left. I have one or two overarching questions for Cam, Ben, and Ross, if possible. So one is, I'd be remiss not to ask you about this, given our current climate. So curious as to how COVID is impacting your businesses and what's going on there. Maybe Ben from Oritain, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. We've definitely been assessing the changing situation on a day-by-day basis. And it's difficult because on the short term, yes, there's difficulties, but I think for all of the solutions that have discussed today, and there's a real opportunity in the next 6 months or so. I was actually sat in on a webinar with Business of Fashion and McKinsey & Co, and they were actually saying that sustainability is a mega trend that is only going to accelerate post-pandemic, and it's going to be one of the key points for companies to communicate, because there's a real lack of consumer trust at this point in time, and it's going to be one of the real key value differentiating factors that a lot of these fashion brands and companies are going to be able to communicate. And I think new innovations, new technologies, new ways of approaching the current fashion industry and supply chains is definitely going to be a real point of differentiation. So it's difficult at this point in time. I think all companies are struggling, but I think the opportunity once we're out of this is going to be pretty vast, because definitely consumer and brand sentiment around sustainability is only set to increase.
Ross, do you want to take a stab at that one from full cycle?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say it's definitely impacting us. It's hard to run a startup. It's certainly harder to run a startup during a pandemic. But you know, I'm cautiously optimistic. Thankfully, our team is healthy and safe, as is our families, and so, you know, we're able to continue to operate. Thankfully, we're able to work from home. People are still producing food, and we'll need some place or we'll need a technology to deal with that food waste. And so we're still relevant. I guess, broadly speaking, I hope that this allows us some space to at least look into building resiliency around our local and regional systems, and build sustainability into how we operate, and rethink kind of the commodification of some of the resources that we hold most dear. So, you know, I'm trying to remain grateful and present, and yet focus on the bigger picture, as Ben said, which is building a more sustainable future. And I am cautiously optimistic that this will give us some time to reflect on that.
Great. And then Cam, from the dry fiber side.
Yeah, so for us, it's slowed down our timetable. So because we work closely with Cornell, their university is closed. I'm based in Los Angeles. Los Angeles has a stay-at-home order, looks like until June. The labs, the third-party labs we were about to start testing with are shut down for the time being. So it's slowed down our timetable, but ultimately I don't think it'll affect our business once things open up again.
Great. Yeah, from the Fashion for Good side, I think we echo much of that. You know, if you look at things from a historical perspective, innovation is vital to kind of emerge stronger from things like this. So consumer and regulatory pressures aren't going away, they're there. And we see innovation as the driver to essentially get the industry going. So I think what's important for both, you know, the innovators and the industry, you know, quite frankly, precision isn't really necessary or even possible. It's kind of impossible at these points in time. It's being agile and adapting. So certainly something you guys are well versed in. So more to come there. So to close, we have 1 minute left. There were a bunch of questions we didn't get to. Apologies for that. We'll look at an approach for how to answer them in the coming days, whether it's directly with some of you one-on-one or other means. So thank you for your engagement. And then a quick plug on our side. So we're doing a live Q&A with We the Planet and Helsinki Fashion Week for Wednesday on Earth Day. And you can find out more about all of our upcoming events on the Fashion for Good website. So thanks again for tuning in today. Thanks to our innovators. You can find more details at their website, which is on the screen here. And if you have any questions, let us know.